Good afternoon and welcome to this Uni Taster Tuesday. My name is John. I'm here from UniTasterDays, and we run these events every single week to support students with university. Today we're going to be covering university study skills, and I'm delighted to be joined by two exceptional speakers. I'm joined by Katie. Katie is joining us from the University of South Wales. Katie's going to speak second. And our first speaker is Shannen. Shannen is joining us from the Shaping Futures UniConnect network, one of 29 networks of universities in England that do loads of incredibly good work, including supporting students to make really good decisions, which relating to university, which is kind of what we do in some ways with these events as well. Shannen's going to introduce university study skills, and she is a higher education progression advisor with Shaping Futures. And I'm always conscious with these events, you're here to listen to our fantastic speakers, not from myself and my instructions. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the floor please to Shannen, joining us from Shaping Futures. Over to you, Shannen.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, John, and hello and welcome to everyone joining us today. So yeah, I'm Shannen, I'm from Shaping Futures, and I'm going to be giving you an overview of study skills today. So I'll be covering a few different things, starting off with our mindset towards studying, so how we can prepare our mind and body to study the best we possibly can. I'll also be going over some learning styles, so everyone learns slightly differently and therefore we need to use slightly different study skills as well. And then finally, I'll be looking at some study techniques that we can use. Again, some different things that you can take away with you and hopefully try during your own study periods. So the first thing I'd like to mention is what study skills actually are. It's probably a topic that you've heard of before. You might have heard the phrase being used by your teachers or your parents, but it's one of those phrases that is difficult to pinpoint exactly what it means. So study skills are really the things that help you become an independent learner. And what we mean by that is being able to learn and meet deadlines without being pressurized to do so by anyone else. So it's really the skills that help you to motivate yourself to meet your deadlines, prepare for exams, everything that you need to do. Now, the further we go through education, the more independent we become. So you might have already noticed this as you're traveling through your high school experience. You become more independent, you do more home learning, more homework and things like that. And you also expected to meet deadlines without being told by teachers or reminded by your parents. So that is certainly true as you go through high school, and even more so when you get to sixth form and college, and if you do progress to university as well. So this is why study skills are so important to pinpoint now and make sure that you develop in this skill. It really is the best way for you to study as a unique person. So what works for one person might not necessarily work for another. You'll find that it's the way you learn efficiently by yourself. So whilst one person might enjoy taking notes and highlighting, another person might prefer listening and doing tasks to remember what they need to know for their exams and for their coursework. So we do already have unique ways of learning. And finally, it's important to point out that these are really transferable life skills. So study skills don't only help us in education, but they can also be useful as we go onto the workplace, as we go into our personal lives as well. Even things like remembering our shopping list when we go in a supermarket. It is a really important skill that travels with us throughout life, so you won't just need it for here and now. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to speak about is our mindset towards studying. So how can we develop our brains and bodies to study in the most efficient way possible? The first thing we need to think about is prioritizing our health, and this encompasses quite a few different things. So first of all, having a really balanced diet. So making sure that we're fueling our body and brain to work in optimal conditions. So remembering to have lots of fresh fruit and vegetables, protein, carbohydrates, all of the good stuff to feed our brain and help us to learn all the material we need to remember. Within that, we also need to remember to drink lots of water. So obviously, when we are studying, it's tempting to reach for energy drinks and sugary drinks that will keep us awake. But it's also important to remember that water is the most important thing to fuel our brain and bodies. So do remember to keep up your water intake, especially when it comes around to exam time as well. Within our health, we also need to think about our sleeping habits. So again, not the most fun thing to think about, but making sure that we get 8 hours of sleep a night is really, really important. And lots of studies have shown that having a good night's sleep can really help us to remember information. So again, particularly when we get around to our exams, we need to try and get a good night's sleep, even if we are feeling a little bit stressed about the exam ahead of us, because it does really help our performance overall. And then finally, you want to think about exercise as well. And now I know 5K runs aren't for everybody, that's absolutely fine. What we're more thinking about is getting outdoors, getting fresh air, getting the blood pumping around your body. So it might be going for a little stroll to school, might be a bike ride with your friends, even taking your dog for a walk, whatever it is that gets you out and moving will be ideal, because it does really help our mindset towards studying. The second thing to think about is avoiding distractions. And now this looks a little bit different for everybody. Personally, when I'm learning, I need to have complete silence, but I know that's not for everyone. So some people like a bit of background music or the background noise of a coffee shop or a library. But for myself, I need to have no distractions whatsoever. So you'll really know your own style and what you can handle whilst you're studying, and definitely try and pinpoint that and do the best for you. In this section, we also need to think about our mobile phones. So again, not very popular for teenage audiences, but trying to keep your phone away whilst you're studying is really, really important, because it's so easy to get distracted by our phones. There's lots of handy apps out there that can do this. So things like the Forest app, where you get rewarded for time that you've not looked at your phone, that is a really useful one. And there's lots of others out there as well that block certain sites and notifications, just to make sure you're studying at your best. You can obviously go the old-fashioned route and just turn your phone off or put it on aeroplane mode, and put it out of sight as well, so you're not tempted to go on it for a little while. Finally, we need to think about managing our time. So if you haven't already made a study timetable, I'd really recommend that you do so. It can help you to structure your day and keep you motivated and make sure that you're on task and completing everything you need to in time for deadlines. So it's helpful to know when your exams are or when your homework's due in, and then you can plan your day according to that. A good place to start is filling in a timetable with all of the things you know you need to do each week. So for example, you could block out your school day, you could block out any extracurricular activities you do, any clubs that you attend, social plans that you have each week, or part-time jobs as well. So you know that time each week is dedicated to those things that you need to do. And then you'll really easily be able to identify your free time, and that will help you to make a structure for which subjects you're going to focus on each day, and make sure that you're given a suitable amount of time for each subject as well. Now, within this, it is really useful to motivate yourself by telling yourself which subject you're going to do. So for example, if you've got a Saturday that's completely free in your diary, it might be quite good to note down which subjects you're going to focus on. And something else I'd really recommend is doing your least favourite subject first. There's a bit of a theory called Eat the Frog, whereby you do the task that you want to do the least first, because it's out the way, and also you've done the thing that's the hardest, so then you can overcome everything else as well. So if, for example, maths is your least favourite subject, maybe do that first on the Saturday morning, and then you've achieved something amazing and you've got the rest of your subjects to look forward to as well. Okay, so moving on to learning styles. There's a few different types of learners out there, and there's quite a few different types really, but it's quite useful to know which style of learning is most appropriate to you, because then you can identify some learning techniques to go along with it. So I'll just talk briefly about the main 3 types of learners. You might be able to identify which one you are just from hearing me speak, but equally there's loads of learning style quizzes out there on Google. So if you did want to do a quick little quiz to find out which learner you are, that's absolutely fine as well. So first of all, if you have a lot of energy, you might be quite an active learner. So you might not really enjoy being sat down at a desk for long periods. you prefer getting up and actually doing something. So if you're an active learner, you might like subjects like PE or science, where you get to do practical things, or even things like geography, where you get to go and do a bit of field work. So if you are an active learner, you might find it better if you use apps and games to revise. And you also might like listen to educational podcasts whilst you're out on a walk, because then you can match up studying with doing something quite physical as well. The second type of learner is auditory. So if you prefer listening to people talk, maybe you prefer listening to music as well. For this type of learning, I'd recommend maybe studying in groups. So if you have a few friends who are also auditory learners, you could talk to each other about a subject. You could also record yourself speaking out your notes, perhaps, so you could listen to them back. And you can also listen to music or radio whilst you're studying as well. And then finally, we have visual learners. So this type of learner likes to watch what's going on. So maybe videos or watching someone write things on a board. That might be quite useful for yourselves. You tend to be quite organized as well. So perhaps you've got all your notes really nicely written out. You've got all your school bag really nicely organized as well. So if you're a visual learner, hopefully you can identify yourself in those traits. Some good techniques for you might be taking notes, highlighting, doing lots of visual things like mind maps, and doing step-by-step instructions of how to complete something. That should help you guys out as well. Okay, so moving on to study techniques. So hopefully these will help you get the information to stick in your mind, and so you're ready for the exams ahead of you. So first of all, we've got mind maps. As I mentioned before, these are perfect for visual learners. So you can get all the information on one page, use lots of colours, break themes down into different chunks. So if you've got something like time, for example, that has lots of related ideas and theories and concepts, you can do one concept in the middle and lots of branches coming off with pictures and colouring ins and all that kind of stuff. So it is perfect for the visual learners to see everything that links to one main theme or idea. We've then got highlighting, again really good for visual learners. So my main tip with this would be avoid highlighting everything on the page. I think it's really easy to do when you're reading a piece of text. You can kind of think everything's important. So my main takeaway message for highlighting is read your piece of text thoroughly once, and then the second time you read through it, then use a highlighter, because the second time you read it, you're more likely to know what's important and what's the most relevant to what you're studying. So that will hopefully avoid a whole page highlighted in yellow. You can also use different colours for different things. So for example, if you've got some main ideas or keywords or key points that you need to remember, do them in different colours so that you can link your arguments and remember them at a glance as well. And it's also nice to have really colourful work. That's good for motivating you as well. Okay, so moving on to note taking. This is a really nice visual way of learning as well, but also really useful for auditory learners, because if you was to write down some notes and then read them back to yourself, that's quite a nice way of instilling the information in your brain. And equally, if you are more of an active learner and you've got some notes, you could try typing them up, because that motion of typing is quite an active thing to do. So really, note taking is fantastic across the board, whatever type of learner you are. With note taking, it's important that you kind of write down the main ideas, your keywords, a few different examples and definitions that are important to what you're writing about. And it's also really good if you don't copy your text word for word. So if you try and remember the main points and write it in your own words, that should help you remember it a little bit better as well. Next up, we've got flashcards. These are really useful as you get closer to your exam. So maybe you've done the note-taking technique and you've remembered quite a lot of what you've written down on the page, but there's a few bits that you're still not too sure about. So at this point, flashcards become really, really helpful. You can also use them to quiz yourself or quiz your friends. So if you write down a question on one side of the flashcard and the answer on the other, you can quiz yourself quickly before you get into the exam. They are really good for breaking down information to smaller chunks as well. So if you have got a big A4 page of notes or a big mind map and you want to break it down into smaller sections, flashcards are perfect for that. And equally, you can use a mixture of pictures and words to break them up a little bit as well. And finally, we've got past papers. You might get a little bit of a shudder thinking about doing an exam before you actually need to, but past papers are such a good way of revising. You can really practice your answers and exam technique, because when we're studying, it can be easy to forget how to write essays and answer questions in an exam style. So this is a great way of remembering how to do that. You might notice common themes as well. So quite often exams might use a similar question to a previous year. So if you have done a past paper, you might pick up on that and be able to remember the answer perhaps, or remember the style of answer that you need to do when approaching that question. So it can be really useful to have a look at past papers. They are great as well for developing exam and time management skills. Again, if you do feel brave enough, doing it under exam conditions and timed will really, really help you when it comes to the actual exam. So I would recommend that if you feel able to. All the exam and past papers will be available on the internet. So if you go and speak to your teachers and find out which exam board you're with, they can direct you as to where to find your past papers. But yeah, this is something I definitely recommend. Maybe when you get closer to your exams or mock exams, just give it a go at home and see how it goes. So that is everything from me. I hope that's given you some ideas of study techniques that you can utilise at home. I'll pass back over to Jon now, and he'll introduce the next speaker for you.
Shannen, thank you. An excellent introduction to this event, looking at various aspects of study skills. I love the way you kind of group stuff into mindset, learning techniques, etc. Really, really good session. I grinned a few times in that session. One, when you mentioned about highlighting, I can remember when I used to revise, definitely not to do it this way. I used to highlight, for the subjects I didn't like, I used to highlight loads to kind of confirm to people that I've actually done it. And then when you read it back, it actually becomes a lot harder. So definitely an excellent tip there. And then prompted for Katie's session, prompted by your tips, I've got myself an apple and some water to listen to Katie in a second. So our second speaker is Katie. Katie is joining us from the University of South Wales, and Katie's going to give us more information about different aspects of study skills. Katie is a Regional Student Recruitment Officer, so she goes around schools in more normal times doing presentations on all aspects of university, of which study skills will be one of them. So with that, I'll pass the floor to Katie, please.
So my session today is on study skills. My name is Katie and I'm speaking to you from the University of South Wales. What we're going to do today is we're going to have a general look into study skills, but also, how we can maximise our study skills so that we're studying most effectively. And then we're also going to look specifically at a few areas in relation to preparing yourself for higher education. Now, I am speaking to you in 2020, so we're going through the COVID-19 pandemic, but fingers crossed, some of you might access this recording down the line in order to refresh yourself with study skills, or to come to study skills again and have a look at what we can do to make sure we're maximising our study skills effectively. And I think actually looking at the pandemic is still really key, because this particular time, I think, has made us really reflective in certain areas of our life. And I think one of those is really around what are we learning about how we learn? Because the pandemic has thrown us into a situation where we're having to motivate ourselves to work independently. You may be working in ways that you've never worked before. And I think what it's done is kind of really highlighted to us the importance of creating the right environment for studying, and also being able to plan your day so that you are productive and you don't spend the day procrastinating, and setting yourself up for setting yourself up to face a task and be able to achieve it in a timely manner. And also, I think more than anything, it's highlighted to us the importance of, when you're studying, being able to reach out and ask for support if you need it. And as I say, all of those skills are really important with study skills. They always have been, and they're always going to be. But I thought we would just look at the pandemic and how it's highlighted that to us. Okay, so something that's really, really important for effective studying is to set yourself up with a really fantastic environment. So I'm afraid to say that the evidence does suggest that working from the comfort of your bed and with your duvet wrapped around you is actually not the best thing to do. So setting yourself up with a workspace that is separate from where you spend your free time or your leisure time or your downtime is really the best thing. So do bear that in mind when you're kind of waking up and just reaching for the laptop ready to go. Also, you need a workspace that is suitable to the task in hand. So that might be that you need a desk and that you need the quietness of a room where you can close the door and signal to whoever else is in your household that this is your time for studying and that you need to have that focus. Or it might be, in hopefully more normal circumstances, that you do need a collaborative working environment. And universities are fantastic for having pod areas where you can kind of collaborate with other people and work via collaboration and networking. So have a think and be honest about the tasks that you've got coming up so that you can work in an effective and suitable space. When you go to that workspace, it's really important that you treat it as if it's a working day. So getting up and getting dressed and ready to face the day at work will actually help prepare your mindset for that day. So it's definitely something that I would recommend. Have a really good breakfast and get yourself dressed and ready to go. And when you approach that workspace, it's really important that you're honest with yourself about what might be distracting. So turn off your mobile phone if you can and put it away, because when you're studying, you're not scrolling through social media and you're not engaging with your friends because they're just distractions. And it's actually an example of procrastination kind of seeping in there. So be honest about it, turn it off and put your mobile phone away. And the other thing is to make sure that ideally at the end of every working day, you tidy your workspace up, because when you approach a workspace that's messy, I think it can cause you to lack concentration. So a great phrase is a tidy workspace is a tidy mind, and that can be really useful. Time management is a skill, and it's a really, really important skill. It's not an easy skill. We're not all born with fantastic time management skills, but it is something that we can learn, and that's the positive. So the reason it's important is because by prioritizing your workload and managing your studies, you're actually more likely to feel positive. So you're going to avoid feeling stressed and avoid feeling overwhelmed, which are really negative things to feel and can affect your learning as a consequence. So it is important to make sure that you understand how to prioritize your workload. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Good time management also means that you actually will probably meet your deadlines without having to compromise on the quality of the work. So rather than feeling that you're rushing and that you've only got this the night before to achieve something, if you set yourself up with a good time management over the course of a longer period of time, the quality of your work is going to be there and you're going to feel really good about it. So that's really key. And also, and I think this is the absolute most important thing about time management, is that it will allow you to have more time for social and extracurricular activities that are not related to your studies. And the reason for that is because rather than kind of procrastinating all day or worrying about the work that you've still got to do and starting it too late, if you've already done it, all of that time that you spent worrying and procrastinating, you're actually going to have gained in order to be able to do the things that you enjoy. Okay, so how do we prepare for a study session? Well, ideally the night before or the morning of, make sure that you approach it. And first thing you do is you write yourself a really, really handy to-do list. And what you've got to do with that to-do list is you've got to prioritize the tasks based on urgency and importance. Now, sometimes it can be quite difficult to be really honest with yourself about what's the most important or urgent task that you have ahead of you. So I really do urge you to be honest. And there's a couple of sort of famous time management phrases. Number one is eat that frog. And that basically is do the most ugly, disgusting task that you are putting off. Do that one first, because when you've done it and it's out the way, you're going to feel great about the fact that you just faced that dragon or ate that ugly frog. And the other one is, how do we eat an elephant? Well, we eat it in small chunks. It's far too big for us to eat all in one go. So bear that in mind. And if it's a large task, don't let it become really urgent and important and not give yourself enough time to do it. Relax and allow yourself that time to be realistic about how long it's going to take you. Also, if you can, make yourself a plan for the day that includes how much time you therefore need to dedicate to each task. And that goes back to that eating that large elephant. You've got to be realistic about how long something is probably going to take you. So make sure that you set yourself up with a planner, so that you've looked at your day and said, right, well, I've got to go to work at this time if you've got a part-time job or you're volunteering or whatever it may be. So that time is allocated to something else. And then you can work in a plan for how long you've got to study. And you can do that for the whole week. Make yourself accountable for your work. And I think one of the ways that we can do that is by motivating ourselves. So record your progress and give yourself a pat on the back for doing it. And I think the best way to record the progress that you've made is to actually schedule in a short break where you go, yeah, tick, I did that and I've achieved that. And now I'm allowed to take a short break because I've achieved something already. And having those short breaks are really key, but also having longer periods of complete switch off time. And the most crucial thing that you can do in that switch off time is get yourself a good night's sleep. So do make sure that you're eating healthily, you're drinking plenty of water, and you're getting a really good sleep, because that actually prepares you for this study session. But you are allowed those shorter breaks as well, where you can really kind of just take 10 minutes out to do something that you enjoy, and ideally do it away from the workspace. So that might be that you go and listen to an audiobook, or you go and I watched an entire movie in 10-minute slots in between my working day, just to give yourself something that motivates you, that you think, I'm allowed to take that short break. But be strict with yourself. Don't watch that whole film in one go and say, well, I'll make up for it because I'll do 4 hours in one go. It's not an effective way to study. So be honest with yourself about it, and treat yourselves to those short breaks that you are allowed to enjoy. Just some interesting facts about studying then. So we are able to fully concentrate on something for about 30 minutes. So that gives you an indication of when to then take that short break away from your desk and then return to the task in hand. After 2 hours of reading, you've probably retained about 50% of the information. So that is why it's really important to start early on a task, because really you need to revisit your reading. It's important to make notes as well as you go through when you are reading, and give yourself the opportunity to go back to it. And really, really remember that we're not born with good study skills. So if you're finding studying a challenge, don't beat yourself up about it. You can learn study skills. And this is why attending sessions like this is really key. Okay, I'd like to sort of do more of a deep dive now into some of the key skills that we need for higher education. So it might be that you're approaching this as a college student or a sixth form student, and you'll be already developing some of these skills. And it's really important that we look at these skills in more detail so that you can progress to higher education feeling confident that the skills that you have in these areas are going to develop for you. So we're going to look at closer at preparing specifically for exams. We're going to do a deep dive into effective reading techniques, and we're going to look at how to structure an academic essay. Preparing for exams then. The likelihood is that you will have exams to do, whether you're doing them through sixth form or college, or that you will have them to do at university. Some courses don't include them, but it's good to know how to prepare for exams. Get yourself organised. Have a really good look at the syllabus and decide how you're going to approach your revision. So we've talked about setting up a study space to be able to do that, and creating a revision timetable and how important they are. And it's just the same for exams. With exams, because you're asked to retain a lot of information and remember the facts that you've written down, without those being readily available to you, you are going to have to find a style that suits you. So doing yourself some kind of past papers, or being able to take your revision notes and get someone to test you on them, that's a really good way to know whether what you're doing is working effectively. And another thing that you can do is called the interleaving and spacing technique. If you're not sure what that is, don't worry. So interleaving means that rather than doing what we say block learning, which is where you take one subject and you learn all about that subject over, say, the whole day, so you might spend 6 hours on history, for example, rather than doing that, perhaps just do the ugliest task first, the one you've been putting off. So learn, and perhaps say your least favourite subject is biology, for example. Take biology and do an hour of it. Then do an hour of history and an hour of something else. So you get the idea in terms of mixing and matching the different subjects rather than spending all day on one area. Because actually, when you look back at what you've achieved by doing that, you'll have ticked off your to-do list. Yeah, I've done some revision in all of these areas. And spacing, which is where you allow yourself to spread out that research that you're doing and that preparation that you're doing over the course of a week. So you're not leaving, well, the opposite of spacing is basically cram revising, which I'm sure you've heard is not really the most effective way to study. It's better to spread it out and keep coming back to it. In terms of preparing for exams, there is also the opportunity to do some additional reading, because that will help you, particularly at higher education, to kind of add in additional points or reference additional people when you are doing your actual exam. So that can be a good idea, and we'll talk more about how to read effectively as well. Finally, in order to prepare for exams, it kind of starts from the very beginning in terms of when you've first embarked upon a subject and you're learning it. So make notes from the very start. That is really important. In terms of reading techniques, when you get to higher education, it might be that you are doing this additional reading that I've just mentioned. So it's really important that you understand how to decide whether that is a text that is worth reading or not. It's a bit different to having a core text that you have to study at college or sixth form that's on the curriculum for that course. This is wider reading outside of that. So when you're going to a library, take a look at the books that are available that are related to the topic that you're looking at, and kind of to really sort of assess the title, have a look at the blurb, the contents page, and make a decision about whether it is the most suitable additional reading for the task that you're doing. Then ask yourself the 5 W's about what you're reading: who, what, when, where, and why. When you read through it first, just get just get a feel for what the book is about, but also then go back and do a second read and ideally make notes that time. Once you've finished reading the relevant section, go over it in your mind several times and ask yourself, can I summarise the main points without having to look at it? And then you'll know whether you've retained that information. Go back over the text again and keep making those notes, and that's how we do a really good close reading exercise. Finally, having a look at how we write essays. So I'm sure you've done loads of those, but it's really important to just reflect on what a really good essay looks like. So normally the introduction is the sort of shortest element, and it's about 10% of the main body of the essay. It gives a general point about the central issue, and it shows that your understanding of the task that you've been set. So are you actually answering the question from the very beginning? And then the main body of the essay is the biggest chunk of writing, and it must fulfill the promises that you've just made in that introduction. It needs to evidence that you've read widely, which is why we've looked at those reading techniques, and also the paragraphs need to link in a logical way. Sometimes you've got to just get everything down on page, and then you can go back and structure it and make it flow. That's okay. Finally, when you're doing a conclusion, on average, it should be about 10 to 15% of the total word count, and it needs to summarise what you've already written. It's not your opportunity to be adding in something new. I hope that's been useful, and it's given you an insight into how to maximise your study skills and prepare for higher education. Thank you ever so much.